Ardennes Forest, December 1944. The king tiger appeared through the falling snow like a nightmare given steel flesh. 70 tons, sloped armor over 6 inches thick, an 88mm cannon that could destroy anything the Americans had, and it was 40 yards from Private Billy Cobb's position. The platoon had walked directly into its path. Men were screaming, diving for cover behind trees that wouldn't stop a machine gun round, let alone an 88. Sergeant Davis was shouting for the bazooka team. They fired. The rocket streaked toward the tiger and detonated against the frontal armor. The tank didn't even slow down. Cobb pressed himself against a frozen tree trunk, heart slamming against his ribs. In his hands was the M3 submachine gun, the weapon his squadmates called scrap metal, the gun that cost $20 to make, and the gun that looked like something from a plumber's toolbox. Everyone said the M3 was useless. Everyone said its slow fire rate would get men killed. But right now, that slow fire rate was the only thing that might save them. Cobb had an idea. Insane, desperate, probably suicidal. He pushed off from the tree and started moving toward the tank. The M3 submachine gun was never supposed to exist. When America entered World War II, the military had the Thompson, the legendary Tommy gun that had defined an era. Beautifully machined, reliable, devastating in close combat, and impossibly expensive. Each Thompson cost roughly $225 to manufacture. In 1942 dollars, that was a small fortune. The weapon required skilled machinists, precision manufacturing, and quality materials. And the Army was building a force of millions. They needed submachine guns by the hundreds of thousands. At Thompson prices, the math didn't work. So the Ordnance Department issued a challenge: design a submachine gun that could be mass-produced cheaply, using unskilled labor and simple manufacturing techniques. The result was the M3. It looked like a grease gun from an automotive shop, which is exactly where its nickname came from. The receiver was stamped from sheet metal. The barrel was simple steel tubing. The stock was a single piece of bent wire. Total manufacturing cost, roughly $20. The soldiers who received them were not impressed. "What the hell is this? Looks like something my kid made in shop class." They gave us a cake decorator and called it a weapon. The complaints were immediate and universal. The soldiers who had trained with Thompsons, or even seen them, felt insulted by the M3. The Thompson was a work of art. The M3 looked like it belonged in a garbage bin. And then there was the fire rate. The Thompson fired at roughly 700 rounds per minute. Fast, aggressive, the kind of volume that won close quarters fights. The M3 fired at 450 rounds per minute. Soldiers called it the slow chugger. They said it sounded like a sewing machine having a heart attack. They bet that the sluggish rate would get them killed when split-second reactions mattered. Nobody wanted the M3. Billy Cobb got one anyway. Cobb was a replacement arriving in France in October 1944. Replacements got what was left. What was left was an M3 that the previous owner had apparently tried to trade for anything better. His new squadmates took one look at his weapon and started laughing. Fresh meat brought his own scrap metal. "Hope you're good at running, kid. That caulk gun won't save you. Welcome to the platoon. Try not to die before you learn anything useful." Cobb absorbed the mockery in silence. He'd heard worse growing up in the coal country of West Virginia. Words were just words. What mattered was whether the weapon actually worked. He found time during rest periods to study the M3, not just cleaning it, understanding it, how the bolt moved, how the magazine fed, how the trigger mechanism functioned. The weapon was simple, brutally simple. Fewer parts than most firearms he'd handled. Nothing fancy, nothing elegant. But simple meant reliable. Simple meant there was less to break. And the fire rate, that slow, mocked fire rate, Cobb noticed something about it. During his first live fire exercise, Cobb discovered the M3's secret. With the Thompson, automatic fire was a controlled spray. You pointed the weapon in a general direction and let volume compensate for precision. With the M3's slower rate, something different happened. Each shot was distinct, separated by enough time that Cobb could actually track where his rounds were going, adjust between shots. walk his fire onto targets like he was using a very fast semi-automatic rifle. The slow fire rate wasn't a flaw. It was a different kind of tool. Other soldiers sprayed and hoped. Cobb aimed and adjusted. His hit rates during training exercises climbed until the sergeant started paying attention. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that, Cobb?" "West Virginia, Sergeant." "You couldn't afford to waste ammunition hunting." "Well, keep doing whatever you're doing." Cobb kept practicing. The mockery continued. Nobody was impressed by a glorified grease gun, but his confidence grew. He was starting to understand his weapon. He just didn't know how badly he'd need that understanding. December 16th, 1944. The German army launched its last major offensive of the war. 3 German armies, over 400,000 men, smashed into the Allied lines in the Ardennes Forest. American units were scattered. Communications collapsed. Entire divisions found themselves surrounded by forces they didn't know existed. It was chaos. And in the chaos, German armor roamed freely. The King Tiger was the most feared tank in the German arsenal. More than 70 tons of steel, powered by a massive engine, protected by armor that could shrug off most anti-tank weapons. American soldiers had a saying: "You didn't fight a King Tiger. You hid from it and prayed someone with an airstrike or a heavy tank destroyer was nearby." But in the snow-choked forests of the Ardennes, hiding was often impossible, and prayer didn't always work. December 20th, 1944, somewhere near Bastogne. Cobb's platoon was moving through dense forest when they heard it. The grinding of tank treads, the rumble of a massive engine, coming from somewhere ahead, impossible to pinpoint in the muffled acoustics of the snow-covered trees. Lieutenant Harris signaled halt. The platoon spread into defensive positions. Then the King Tiger appeared. It emerged from a gap in the trees like something from a fever dream, massive beyond comprehension. And the long 88mm barrel swept across the American positions. For a moment, everyone froze. Then Sergeant Davis screamed, "Bazooka, now!" The bazooka team was already moving. They had trained for this. The loader slammed a rocket into the tube. The gunner shouldered the weapon, aimed, fired. The rocket streaked across the 40 yards and struck the Tiger's frontal armor dead center. The explosion was bright, loud, and completely ineffective. The armor wasn't even scorched. The rocket had detonated against steel so thick that the shaped charge couldn't penetrate. The Tiger's turret began to rotate toward the bazooka team. The 88 fired. The tree behind the bazooka team disintegrated. Both men were thrown backward by the concussion. One didn't get up. The platoon scattered, men running, screaming, and diving behind anything that might offer cover. The Tiger's machine gun opened up. A stream of tracers ripped through the forest, shredding branches and bodies alike. Cobb found himself behind a thick pine, breathing so hard he thought his lungs would burst. He could see the Tiger through the trees, could see the barrel adjusting, hunting. The platoon was pinned. The bazooka was useless. There was no anti-tank weapon in their arsenal that could penetrate that armor. They were going to die here, unless someone did something insane. Cobb's eyes locked on the Tiger's turret, not the armor. He knew he couldn't penetrate the armor, but there, on the front of the turret, the vision ports. Small openings covered with thick glass blocks. They let the crew see out, target enemies, and they were the tank's eyes. Cobb's mind raced, and the M3's bullets couldn't kill a King Tiger. But .45 ACP rounds, heavy, slow, powerful, could do damage to vision blocks, could crack them, obscure them, blind the monster. It was insane. He'd have to get close, stay exposed, fire accurately while the tank's machine guns tried to cut him apart. He'd have to hit those tiny ports consistently, and that's when he realized the M3's slow fire rate was exactly what he needed. Spray and pray wouldn't work. He needed aimed, sustained fire, the kind of control that only the defective 450 rounds per minute allowed. He was moving before he finished the thought. "Cobb, what the hell are you doing?" Sergeant Davis's voice was distant. Cobb was already out from behind his tree, running laterally through the snow. He needed an angle, and the frontal vision ports were his target, but he had to get close enough for the .45 ACP rounds to have any effect. The Tiger's machine gun swung toward him. Cobb dove behind a fallen log as bullets tore through the air above him. Snow and bark exploded around his position. He forced himself to breathe, to think. The tank couldn't see him well. The vision ports were small, limited field of view. If he moved fast, stayed low, he might get close enough. He pushed up and ran again, 20 yards from the tiger. Cobb dropped to a knee behind a shattered stump. The tank was massive from here. The machine gun was still tracking, searching. He raised the M3, sighted on the turret, found the main vision port, a small rectangle of armored glass near the gun mantlet. He squeezed the trigger. The M3 chattered, slow, steady, each shot distinct. Cobb watched his tracers, saw where they hit, adjusted. The first round struck the armor uselessly. The second burst hit the vision port's frame. The third burst walked directly onto the glass. Crack, crack, crack. Heavy .45 caliber slugs slamming into the vision block. Not penetrating. The glass was designed to stop shrapnel, but impacting, cracking, starring. Cobb held the trigger, let the slow fire rate guide his aim, walked his rounds across the port until the glass was a spiderweb of fractures. The machine gun swung toward his position. He was already moving, running through snow, lungs burning, the machine gun's tracers chasing him. Cobb circled the tank, found another position, raised the M3 again, the commander's cupola, another vision port. He fired, and the slow chug-chug-chug of the M3 steadied his aim, round after round impacting the port, glass cracking. The tiger's turret was rotating, trying to track him, but he was moving too fast, too erratically. And more importantly, the crew was losing their vision. Through fractured, starred glass blocks, the world became a blur of shadows and snow. They couldn't see him clearly, couldn't track him accurately. Cobb circled again, found the driver's position, fired. More glass cracking, more vision compromised. The tiger's movements became erratic. The turret swung wildly. The tank lurched forward, then stopped. The crew was blind, or close enough. Inside the tank, the German commander made a decision. He couldn't see. His driver couldn't see. The American with the submachine gun was still out there, still firing. And they couldn't track him. The tiger began to reverse. Cobb watched from behind a tree as the massive tank backed away. Slowly at first, then faster, retreating into the forest it had emerged from. The machine gun fired a few more blind bursts, then silence. The tiger disappeared into the snow. Cobb stood in the clearing, the M3 smoking in his hands. His legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees in the snow, breathing in great, ragged gasps. The adrenaline dump left him shaking uncontrollably. He'd done it. The monster was gone. Sergeant Davis reached him first. "Cobb, you crazy son of a bitch!" Cobb couldn't speak, just nodded. Davis looked at the M3, looked at the empty casings scattered in the snow, looked at the track marks where the tiger had retreated. "You blinded a king tiger. With that thing." Cobb finally found his voice. "Couldn't kill it, Sergeant, so I took its eyes." Davis shook his head slowly. "I thought that grease gun was useless." Cobb looked at the M3 in his hands. Ugly, cheap, slow, the weapon that had just saved 23 men. "It's not useless, Sergeant, it's just different." The story spread through the battalion within days. A replacement private with a grease gun had driven off a king tiger. Not by killing it. That was impossible with the submachine gun. But by understanding what his weapon could do. The slow fire rate that everyone mocked had allowed him to aim automatic fire like a rifle, to walk his rounds onto tiny targets that spray and pray would have missed. The defect was the feature. Other soldiers started looking at their M3s differently, not as inferior Thompsons, as different tools with different strengths. The mockery of the scrap metal gun got quieter after that. Billy Cobb survived the Battle of the Bulge. He survived the rest of the war. Went home to West Virginia, worked in the mines like his father and grandfather. Raised a family. He kept the M3's operating rod, a small piece of the weapon, in his desk drawer until he died. A reminder of the day a $20 gun had been worth more than its weight in gold. The M3 itself went on to serve American forces for decades. Through Korea, through Vietnam, special operations units carried it into the 21st century. The weapon that soldiers called junk in 1944 became a quiet legend. Simple, reliable, effective in the right hands, just like the coal miner's son who had understood it when no one else would. And the Army manual said the M3 was effective only at close range. The manual didn't imagine a soldier who could aim automatic fire. His squadmates called the grease gun scrap metal. They stopped laughing when the scrap metal drove off a 70-ton tank. Sometimes the weapon everyone mocks is the weapon that saves your life. Sometimes the flaw is a feature waiting to be discovered, and sometimes a $20 piece of stamped steel is worth more than the finest craftsmanship, if you understand how to use it. They called his gun scrap metal. They called him crazy for running toward a king tiger. But 23 men went home to their families because a replacement private with a useless weapon refused to accept that useless meant useless. The slow fire rate, the ugly stamped receiver, the cheap construction, in all of it, exactly what the moment required. If this story of ingenuity, desperation, and proving the doubters wrong resonated with you, hit that subscribe button now. This channel uncover the forgotten warriors of World War II, the soldiers who found new ways to fight when the odds said it couldn't be done. Drop a comment below. Would you have trusted a $20 grease gun against a king tiger? Or would you have stayed behind cover and prayed? Share this with someone who understands that understanding your tools beats having the best tools. And check the video on screen right now for another story of unconventional weapons that changed the battlefield.